Welcome to the Beyond You podcast, where we have real conversations about healing, trusting yourself again, and building the kind of relationships that actually feel good. I'm Samantha, and if you've ever felt like you're just going through the motions, like you're doing all the right things but still feeling disconnected, you're in the right place. Because here we go beyond the surface, beyond the hurt, beyond the patterns that keep you stuck. So take a deep breath, get comfortable, and let's get into it. I'm so grateful you're here with me today, showing up for yourself in this way, because I know you could be anywhere else and you're here with me, and I just really appreciate you for doing that. If you've ever found yourself shrinking to keep the peace or pushing past your needs to make it work, this episode is for you. Because today we're talking about something that comes up a lot in my own life and with my clients, and it could be coming up for you too, the difference between growth and self-abandonment. And you know that moment when you're trying to figure out, is this me evolving or am I just betraying myself again? And a lot of times we get in this space and we don't really talk about it. That moment when discomfort shows up and you're not sure if you should just push through it or honor it as a signal. So that's what we're going to unpack today, with real talk, real examples, and some tools you can use right now. This topic is so close to my heart because I've spent years, both personally and with my clients, learning to distinguish between these two experiences. Because honestly, both growth and self-abandonment can feel very uncomfortable. And here and just within sessions, within groups, anything I'm doing, I want you to be comfortable with uncomfortable. Both can require sacrifice, both can involve pain, but one leads to expansion and the other leads to contraction. So one comes from your power and one comes from your powerlessness. So I want us to be able to tap into that. And I want to be able to learn and tell the difference. That's where true transformation happens. So take a deep breath with me. Feel your body in this moment, and let's get into one of the most important conversations you might have with yourself today. Okay, so let's get honest. Why it's so hard to tell the difference? Because I want to be real with you. It's not always clear when we're growing versus when we're abandoning ourselves. Growth can be uncomfortable, but so can abandoning yourself. So the difference. Understand that one expands you, the other shrinks you. One comes from your power, the other from powerlessness. But what makes distinction so difficult, especially for just as women and men of color, as people of color? First, many of us were raised with narratives of sacrifice as virtue, right? Our mothers, grandmothers, and cultural heroines were often celebrated for how much they could endure. The love, like the struggle love that we've talked about in just a podcast overall in general, and how much they could give despite their own emptiness. We learned early that pushing through pain was the expectation, not the exception. And second, we're navigating systems and spaces that weren't designed for our comfort, our expression, or our thriving. When discomfort is your baseline in certain environments, it becomes harder to distinguish between necessary discomfort for growth and necessary suffering from self-abandonment. And finally, let's be real, sometimes it's more immediately comfortable to abandon ourselves than to expand in our truth. Growth often requires facing conflict, disappointing others, and stepping into the unknown, where self-abandonment can feel like the safer choice in that moment, right? Because we have to deal with just the people pleasing when we're just thinking about what someone else needs, or just, I talked with a client earlier today where it was more about what someone would feel and think than it is about what they felt. Right. And I think a lot of us do this and we don't really give ourselves a chance to talk about it. When we are abandoning ourselves, we are not, or so much worried and when everyone else is thinking or doing and how they're going to see us or their perception, than we are thinking about what is good for us. And so I want us to be able to allow yourself to kind of really stay true to you, right? So here's how I've come to understand the difference. It's really about the intention and where the decision is coming from. And I think about it, if it's coming from your head, that's a place of rationalization and people pleasing, which we just were talking about. Or is it coming from your heart, right? That piece of wisdom and authentic knowing, that intuition, to the Holy Spirit, is this your authentic knowing to what's going on? And so understand, I want to kind of break it down a little bit more, because self-abandonment sounds like I'll deal with it later. It's not a big deal, right? We just kind of push ourselves aside, or making comments like, I don't want to make them mad, so I'll just say yes. right? Like you are not allowing yourself to think about what you want, or let me not cause problems. Right? We see our emotions or feelings as burden, or worried about what we're talking about, just somebody else, or something like everyone else is fine with this, so I should be too. Right? We kind of push in what society wants or thinks that we should do, or there's times where when you're self-abandoning sounds like I don't have a choice. Right? We feel like we don't have a choice in something. So notice how all of those statements that I mentioned are coming from a place of powerlessness. They're about avoiding, delaying, or denying your own experience to accommodate others or circumstances. And I want to just kind of do the opposite of what growth sounds like. So growth sounds like this is hard, but I know it's leading me somewhere better, right? We're in a more power. We're taking responsibility over what's going on. It just is allowing yourself to kind of to be able to push you into where you want to be or the person that you're becoming. Also, growth can sound like I'm holding this boundary even though it's uncomfortable. We still stay true to ourselves each and every time. Or growth can sound like I'm honoring my needs even if they don't understand. Or I'm choose to engage with this challenge because it aligns with my values. And lastly, something such as this doesn't feel good, but it feels right. Right? Like all of these are choosing, you're coming from a place of you deciding what's going on for you. So these statements come from a place of power and choice. They acknowledge the difficulty but center your agency and alignment. So I hope you guys can start seeing the difference in what this is. So understand that you are not too much. You've just been in spaces that couldn't hold all of you. So when you're making a choice from your heart rather than your head, there's a different quality to it. Your head might rationalize self-abandonment with logical arguments about why you should just go along with things, but your heart speaks the language of truth, even when that truth is inconvenient. So I just know for me, I remember a situation in my own life where this distinction became crystal clear. I was in a relationship where I kept telling myself I was being patient and growing through the challenges. I thought I was doing the spiritual evolve thing by staying and working through difficulties, struggle of. Right? But my body was telling a different story. I had constant anxiety. I mean, don't rarely have this panic attacks, right? But I was having panic attacks at the time, trouble sleeping, and this persistent feeling of walking on eggshells. And you guys know how uncomfortable that is. And I told myself that relationships take work and growth. Growth isn't always comfortable, right? I think we kind of keep feeling like we have to go through these situations to get to this destination, which for some it's very true, which I'm not going to deny that it hasn't worked for some. But understand with me, what I didn't recognize then was that I wasn't growing, I was shrinking. And there was moments, I remember a moment when I was dating someone, right, when we were having a disagreement, and I could actually feel myself shrinking. I could actually feel myself kind of going inside my body and going inside myself. And I was making myself smaller and quieter and less, what I felt was less needy. And I felt like I was tolerating behavior that didn't align with my values. I thought I was being the bigger person, but I was just silencing my truth. And it's hard to kind of come to terms with those things. And, let me know in the comments if you resonate with this, because the turning point came when a dear friend asked me a simple question. Are you choosing from this place of love or a place of fear? And I realized immediately that it was fear. Fear of being alone, fear of starting over, fear of admitting I made a mistake, which a lot of times we don't allow ourselves to do. And I really want you to think about that question. Are you choosing this place? Are you choosing this from a place of love or a place of fear? And I had to understand for me that wasn't growth. That was self-abandonment disguised as spiritual maturity. And I know that can be, I really want you to be able to reflect on that question. So think about, when was the last time you called something growth when it was really you avoiding conflict or your own discomfort? And how did your body feel during that time? What signals might it have been sending you? And we didn't even realize it. I know for me, I could feel myself shrinking inside, just my body feeling tighter and smaller, and maybe something's wrong, and just going on what sometimes society pushes on us. So I know that was coming up for me. So let's kind of go deeper into how to tell if it's growth or self-abandonment. So now we're going to get practical. How do you actually tell the difference between growth and self-abandonment in the moment when you're in the thick of it? So let's break it down with the three clear signs of self-abandonment, not growth. One is that you feel resentful afterwards. Make sure to take down these notes if this is something that you want to be able to take with you, because I don't want, we're living our peace every day, so we don't want to take abandonment with us. So the first one is you feel resentful afterward. So I want you to pay close attention to how you feel after making a choice or taking an action. Growth might feel challenging, but it generally doesn't leave you feeling resentful. Self-abandonment almost always does. And I want you to really think about that. If saying yes or staying silent leaves you feeling frustrated, depleted, or unseen, you likely abandoned yourself. When you abandon yourself, understand that there's an emotional aftermath that you have to deal with, a kind of emotional debt that comes due. It feels like that. And so you might find yourself snapping at unrelated things, feeling inexplicably irritated, or ruminating on the situation long after it's over. And this happened with a client of mine who kept saying yes to extra projects at work. She told herself it was growth, building her portfolio, proving her capabilities, being a team player, but she would come back or she would come home and pick fights with her partner over small things. That resentment was a clear signal she was abandoning her needs for rest and balance. Number two, you're ignoring your own body's signals. Our bodies are incredibly wise messengers, but we've been taught to override their signals in the name of productivity, politeness, or pushing through. So we will have sometimes like a tight chest, stomach knots, headaches, shallow breathing, clenched jaw. Your body knows when you're carrying something that isn't yours. It knows when you're betraying yourself, and even when your mind has justified it beautifully. And I've learned to pay particular attention to my heart space. When I'm in alignment with what's going on within me, within my values, even if I'm stretching beyond my comfort zone, there's still like an openness in my chest. Like I'm still allowing things to come in. Like, yes, it feels uncomfortable, but it doesn't feel like I should stop. Right. And this is when you kind of like done the work of just kind of working through just your nervous system. But I really want you to just overall pay attention. When I'm abandoning myself, like there's a tightness, a constriction, a feeling of my energy being compressed rather than expanded. Your body never lies to you. The question is, are you willing to listen? And I've had this with one of my clients describe it as a difference between clean pain and dirty pain, which I love it how, people just kind of simplify the words with it. Clean pain is the natural discomfort of growth, like the soreness after a good workout, right? That clean pain. But dirty pain, and dirty, like I'm using quotations, dirty pain is the suffering that comes from denying your own experience, like the agony of untreated wound that festers. So I want you to kind of get like the difference between the two. And number three, you're trying to avoid conflict at all costs. If you're playing small to avoid discomfort, you're not growing, you're disappearing. Growth sometimes requires disappointing others, setting boundaries that won't be popular, or speaking truths that might create tension. If your primary emotion or your primary motivation is avoiding any form of conflict, even healthy, necessary conflict, you are likely abandoning yourself. And I see this often with a lot of us that do this, like especially just, a women of color, clients who have been conditioned to be not too much in predominantly white spaces. They silence their perspectives, swallow microaggressions, and dim their light to avoid being labeled as difficult or aggressive. But that's not growth. That's survival in spaces that aren't nurturing their fullness. Your peace is a boundary, not a bonus, right? Like I want peace to be so natural for us that we don't fight when we have it. So what I do is I reflect on my own experience. I notice that many of my greatest moments of growth came precisely when I was willing to engage with conflict rather than avoid it. When I finally told that difficult client that I couldn't continue working with them, when I had the uncomfortable conversations with past, dates, or just people who I was with prior, my past relationships, about how their comments were affecting me. When I admitted to myself that a friendship had become one sided and needed to change. Like, these are all moments, those difficult moments where you had to make difficult choices, but it was for your own benefit and for your peace. Okay. And the willingness to face conflict with grace and integrity, but without apology for your needs, is often a sign you're choosing growth over self-abandonment. So let's kind of go into what growth actually looks like, because I know we don't really get to talk about this too much. So if those are the signs of self-abandonment, what does actual growth look like? How can you recognize when discomfort is serving your expansion or rather than your, contraction? Okay. So if it feels hard but empowering, that's when you can tell it's growth, because growth often involves challenge, right? But there's a sense of purpose in that challenge. You may feel nervous, but there's a sense of alignment with that. There's a difference between this is hard but meaningful and this is hard and draining my soul. Think of it like the difference between hiking up a mountain, difficult but rewarding, versus, slogging through quicksand, difficult and dangerous, right? So I'm trying to give you that kind of metaphorical difference on what that looks like. The number two is you're proud of yourself after. Even if it wasn't comfortable, when you choose growth, there's often a sense of quite pride afterwards. And I know when I had hard conflicts and kind of faced on what I didn't like, yes, it was hard, but afterwards, I feel like I stood my ground in what was mean, what wasn't, which it's okay, right? I know it takes practice, but it's okay that not everybody agrees with that. And so understand when you choose growth, there's often a sense of quiet pride afterward, like we talked about. Not pride from external validation, though, but the external knowing that you honored yourself and your path, right? The self-abandonment, in contrast, usually leaves you feeling some version of shame, resentment, or emptiness. And I remember finishing a difficult conversation with a client about whether it was like rate increase or when it was about like how it wasn't a good fit. It wasn't easy, and yes, I was nervous about their response, but afterwards I felt a deep sense of having honored my worth, whether it's in business or just what felt good for me, and I felt like that's growth. Number three, understand that you're connected to your values, not disconnected from your needs. So understand when true growth aligns with your core values, what matters most to you at the deepest level. It might require sacrifice, but that sacrifice serves something meaningful to you. Self-abandonment, on the other hand, often requires disconnecting from your authentic needs in ways that don't serve your highest good. So next, there's a heart-centered quality to that decision when you're in growth as well, because it's kind of what I mentioned earlier, but growth decisions often come from the heart, not just the head. Okay. So there's this like intuitive knowing, a sense of rightness, even amidst of like the difficulty that requires. And so that self-abandonment decisions tend to be head-based rationalizations that override what your heart knows to be true. Because I want you to be able to remember that you're choosing your power. You're choosing from power, not powerlessness. And perhaps most importantly, like, know that growth comes from a place of agency. So even when circumstances aren't ideal, you're making choices from a place of power, though. The power to respond authentically, to set boundaries, to honor your truth, right? Self-abandonment stems from a sense of powerlessness, feeling like you had no choice but to compromise yourself. And so understand that growth doesn't always feel good, but it always feels true. And I remember having, this was like years ago, but I had a client who left a high paying corporate job to start her own business, right? It was scary. Absolutely. Was it uncomfortable? Every day. But she described it as the most aligned discomfort I've ever felt. That's the paradox of real growth. It can be both challenging and deeply right at the same time. So I want us to be able to remember to choose yourself and what you want to do and how you want to be. And so what I thought would be helpful would be practical tools for discernment and just kind of realizing what that is. So we'll talk deeper into that. Now let's talk about practical tools you can use to discern between growth and self-abandonment in your daily life, because this isn't just theoretical. It's practice that can transform how you make decisions, set boundaries, and honor yourself. And so what I invite people to do is I want them to do a body check-in, because before making any decision, especially the one that involves potential discomfort, I need you to take 30 seconds to check in with your body. Place one hand on your heart and one on your belly, but if you can, I'm just more of just like a heart person, putting my right hand on my heart and taking 3 deep breaths and asking myself, what does my body feel about this choice? Because I always want you to be in your hell yes moments, what I've talked a lot about in the episodes. Where am I? And really notice, I'm like, where am I feeling tension or openness? And then if this tension could speak, what would it say? I know for me right now, if it could speak, it would say that you need to relax. You need to be able to decide on what works for you in this moment, right? And so remember, your body holds wisdom that your logical mind might override. Learning to listen to these physical signs is a crucial for distinguishing between healthy challenge and self-betrayal. And so what I also love being able to think about is like asking that power question. So when you're facing a difficult situation, I want you to be able to ask yourself, am I responding from my power or powerlessness? Growth decisions come from your power. So don't you remember this? The growth decisions come from your power, your agency, your values, your authentic choice, right? But the self-abandonment decisions come from powerlessness, fear, obligation, guilt, or the belief that you don't have a choice. So I really want you to really take in the difference here. So whether you're in a relationship that doesn't feel good, and we talked a little bit about this in episode you guys love about when to let go, right? But I really need you to be able to decide on what is happening here for you, because I don't want you to ever feel like you have to abandon yourself in any way. And sometimes just asking this question to bring a clarity to a confusing situation. And so next, you can also be able to use this as well, which can be very helpful, the future self perspective. And so if you imagine yourself 5 years from now, and this is what I asked when deciding about getting the divorce. And I remember one of my old coworkers asked me this: if I imagine yourself 5 years from now, looking back on this moment and choice you're making, ask, will my future self thank me for this decision? I know when thinking about, my past divorce, it was a question of, can I deal with this 5 years from now, right? Like, would I want to be in the same situation if nothing changed, And also asking yourself, am I creating more possibility or less possibility for my future self? Like, I want you to really be able to think about things that you'll have to go through if nothing changed, or so it's not waiting constantly on somebody else, but more about you making the choice for yourself. So then last time we should be able to think about, is this choice expanding or contracting from my life? Because this perspective can help you see beyond immediate comfort to the longer term impacts of your choices. So I think a lot of times just go by immediate. And then we're going to do the values alignment check, right? So write down your top 5 values, the principles that matter most to you when facing a difficult choice. Ask yourself which option is most aligned with these values. Growth tends to move you toward your values, right? And that's really a lot of what I talk about, like going towards our values is your life worth living, which we talk about, just like acceptance and commitment, kind of therapy practices as well. But, but knowing that self-abandonment often requires compromising those core values for temporary ease. And I remember that one of my clients values authenticity, growth, community, creativity, and freedom. I would like to really tap it down, just do the top 3 or 4. But when she was considering staying in a job that paid well but stifled her creativity and authentic expression, this values check made it clear she was abandoning herself, even though her logical mind had excellent reasons why staying was a sensible choice. So I really want you to be able to think about if any of these work for you. I really want you to invite yourself to kind of check in with yourself daily. Like, I literally just got off a call with an individual who was talking about just learning to trust yourself, right? And we were talking about on how when it comes to these decisions, whether it comes from just, friends or relationships, I just want you to think about, where did I honor myself today? Like, really be able to reflect this, especially in the evening. Where did I abandon myself? What choices felt like growth, even if they were uncomfortable? What choices left me feeling resentful or depleted? Like this simple practice builds your discernment muscle over time because I want it to be strong, and you just have to be able to ask and check in with yourself because I want you to be able to helping you recognize patterns and make adjustments as needed. And so, as we come to the end of our time together, I want to leave you with just this. You don't have to abandon yourself for love, peace, success, or acceptance. In fact, the most loving relationships, the deepest peace, the most meaningful success, and the most authentic acceptance come precisely when you refuse to abandon yourself. The more you choose alignment over approval, the more you create a life that actually feels good, not just one that looks good from the outside. So, learning to distinguish between growth and self-abandonment is a practice, not a one-time achievement. There will be days when you nail it and days when you slip into old patterns. Even I do it. Be gentle with yourself in those moments. The awareness you're building is itself a form of growth. What matters is that you're developing discernment to know the difference and the courage to choose alignment even when it's the harder path. Remember, true growth doesn't diminish you, it expands you. It doesn't require you to become less so others can be more. It asks you to become fully yourself so you can contribute your unique gifts to the world. So you're not behind, you're just getting started. So this week, I invite you to notice one situation where you might be calling something growth when it's actually self-abandonment. Bring awareness, do not judge, to this pattern. Then make one small choice that honors your authentic needs, even if it creates discomfort. Okay. Thank you for showing up for yourself today. Until next time, remember, true growth may not always feel comfortable, but it will always feel like coming home to yourself. Make sure to subscribe and follow so you can make sure to get every one of our episodes that we drop every Wednesday. And I cannot wait to talk to you soon.